Good question. I don't know that I have the answer, but I have some thoughts on that. And so, I mean, on certain stories, breaking news, there's an explosion, there's a disaster. I mean, it's always going to be people want to know exactly what's happening, the latest, and they want it very short and quick. That's just going to be the way it always is, right? I mean, and that's good. I mean, in many ways that you can do that. You might save a life if somebody gets this information right away, rather than make them read a 5,000-word story until they get to the end and say, now run for your life because the gun is 12 feet away. But in other cases, on many topics, I think we could re-examine the way we tell stories. Now, the reason we use this thing they call the inverted pyramid, where you start with the most important fact and then less important, all goes back to the invention of the telegraph and technologies from the 19th century, where if we didn't get the fact out, the telegraph might go down. And then if the important news was way back in the story, if the telegraph went out, you wouldn't get the important information out. So we developed this form of reporting that, so it grew out of a 19th century invention. But there are some current efforts, and recent efforts, to, at least on other certain kinds of stories, things that take a lot of reporting, to not give you the answer right away, to make you be patient. And it's turning out that if you do it well, if you do really thorough reporting, if you do the techniques, and this is what my new book's going to be about, what are the techniques, so it's going to be about what are the techniques to do masterful storytelling, to keep people on the edge of their seat, so if you do that, you can actually make people wait for months to get to the answer. It's called serial, and it tells the story in serial fashion, weekly installments, about an hour each week. And it's about a murder that happened in 1999. And she's revisiting this case. And so she tells the story of the murderer and the accused, and he was found guilty. He's been in prison now for 15 years. He's a Muslim, he's from Pakistan, but he's very American, he grew up in the US and all. So it's got all these dimensions. But they got over 60 million people to download the podcast. And the podcast is paid for by donations. People just give money freely. They don't have to give money. So now she's working on her next broadcast, which will be probably next fall. And again, it'll probably be like 12 installments. And she doesn't give you the answer until week 12. And they found that because she told the story well, it was like a fiction story. And that's kind of one of the principles in my book, is that you can use techniques of fiction storytelling to do non-fiction stories. And that keeps people interested. And they'll listen, they'll come back, and they're just beating up the social media world saying, oh my God, did you hear Serial this week? What do you think about this or that? And then it turns out, and this has always been true, but it turns out people are rediscovering that people like audio, because you're often stuck traveling on a bus or a train or a plane for hours. And you can download the podcast and you listen while you're still doing something else. And you're just listening to the story for an hour or 2 hours or whatever. And also people like to binge. They so you may have missed the first few episodes of Serial. Well, you just download all 3 or 4 of them and you're listening to them all in a row. So people like to do that. It turns out that, mobile devices are perfect for that. So I think that's part of the answer. I don't know if it's all of it, but it's a piece of the answer. And then one last piece of it, broadcasters used to always think that you had to get all the audience together at one moment in time. And now they're accepting the reality that you don't have to have everybody together at the same time. It might be only 10% of your audience comes together at the original broadcast, 90%, like an iceberg. We use this in one of my books. We call it the digital media iceberg. That only the tip of the iceberg is what we see. Bless you, salute. Most of the iceberg is hidden, and that's how it is now, the way people consume media. A lot of it comes over a period of time, not all at once.
Que ya no es importante como el broadcast de tener a toda la gente en un mismo momento exactamente, que es lo que ellos llaman como el iceberg de los medios, que no solamente, o sea, que ya la importancia no es como solamente tener a la gente en ese momento, sino que cuánta gente puedes tú lograr que se conecte a partir de una historia.
¿Cuánto grabaron? Es que ya llegaron los otros dos invitados
Bueno.
para que puedan hablar con él un poquito antes de la
Claro que sí. No, está bien. Yo creo que las otras inquietudes como que quedó como resuelto de la parte de lo que tenían.
Give me this and share with everybody. Okay, my card, so if you need to get my name spelled right or any of that stuff.
That's great, thank you.
Because when I did my ticket, they did it, my name, they put John Vernon Pavlik. John Vernon Mister was all one name, and then Pavlik was one name. When I got to the airport, they were like, what is this? John Vernon Mister?
So I don't know if you want to close this with some advice or with some little speech about this journalist
Well, I
or
can
new
try some, I
techniques.
can try something. I think that there is a huge opportunity now that may be unprecedented because you're the people who can invent the future of journalism. Many people in the past, when they started working in journalism, you went to a small market and you just had to learn what they taught you and you just did what you're told. Now you still have to learn a lot, but you also you can help shape the future. Because there's so many things that have to be figured out with all these new tools. How do we use them creatively and effectively? So that's the thing, is I think you have a real opportunity to help invent the future of journalism.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That's what we
Voy a traer a los otros